Welcome back, everybody. Today I'm going over the major cheating scandal in chess. So far, every single person on YouTube has covered this, although I have not yet. This is the game between Hans Niemann and Magnus Carlsen, where everyone was shocked that Magnus Carlsen lost his 53-game winning streak, and Hans Niemann said he had this position on his chess analysis board that morning, and he said chess speaks for itself when he was asked to speak about his win. This is the main line in the Nimzo Indian. Magnus Carlsen decides to play c3 here, which is not main line. He plays a lot of stuff that's off tempo. Normally you're supposed to play knight f3 immediately here, but Magnus plays knight c3. Hans capitalizes on it, makes the best move. Magnus plays g3, which is also not the best move immediately. You want to play something like this or this. Okay, so Magnus still playing good moves, but doesn't play the perfect best moves. Plays bishop g2. It's all fine. He's not going to make a mistake in the first couple moves, but he makes a couple slight inaccuracies, which gives Hans Niemann the slight advantage even in the first 7 moves, and he's black. So Hans takes, really normal move, just locking down the center, and it looks pretty equal here if Magnus were to play h4, which is h4, which is a crazy move to see, but he doesn't see it. Plays knight out, ready to castle. Hans plays c5, Magnus castles, and Hans takes in. Magnus takes back the queen, and now Hans, instead of trading queens in the middle, brings his knight out, hitting the queen, hitting his own queen, so it's defending. Magnus takes the pawn, and Hans Niemann plays pawn forwards. Here is where Magnus falls into a little bit of a bad position, where he plays bishop out, attacking the knight, and Hans Niemann attacks Magnus Carlsen's knight. He tries to be a little bit fancy and doesn't move his bishop away. He should have just taken. He shouldn't have tried to be fancy, get a free tempo, and get his rook out, because Hans Niemann finds bishop e6. A crazy move. This is what he had on his analysis board that morning, apparently. We don't know, but he's 2688. I don't think he's cheating. So we have rook takes queen, bishop takes queen, rook takes rook, rook takes rook. Now Hans Niemann's position just looks better. He has more development. His pawns look better. Magnus takes, he takes back, and these pawns are worse than these pawns, which is just like, these pieces aren't, they're kind of the same, but where's this knight going, right? You gotta reroute it. So we go king over. Hans Niemann plays rook to the D open file. The open D file. And Magnus plays king e1, guarding the d2 square for the rook not to jump in. And Hans Niemann puts his knight on the rim of the board, defending the bishop, and ready to jump in or do whatever he wants, really. Magnus really wants to trade the rook here. If Hans Niemann were to take, Magnus takes, and he runs his king over to defend with these pawns, that would be a really good scenario for him, except Hans Niemann plays the correct way, not trading rooks, and has long-term threats on this pawn. So now Magnus attacks the bishop, he drops the bishop back, and now Hans Niemann is actually attacking the pawn. Although you can see this pawn is getting threatened, it's defended now, but that's for now. We have pawn forwards, and now it's being threatened by this, this, and this. So we have bishop takes, knight takes, rook takes. So now it's a knight versus a bishop. They both have rooks. Hans Niemann's pawns are better. He's up 1 pawn against Magnus, and the time right now is pretty much equal. But Magnus spends 12 minutes on this one move. And after king forwards, we have bishop d5 by Magnus, which is the correct move. If Magnus were to play something like rook here, Hans Niemann would have rook c1. We have king forwards, knight here, and then Magnus plays something like this, and we have here and we're attacking the rook, or we have something like rook up. That's not as good. Computer doesn't like me, so I'm never going to say my own thoughts again. That's not what we had in the game. What we had in the game was bishop d5. Then we have rook c7, and Magnus plays rook a8, attacking this pawn. And Hans Niemann pushes the pawn forwards, so it's defended by his other pawn. Magnus targets this pawn with the bishop and the rook, but it's already defended by 2, so Hans Niemann doesn't have to do anything about it. He pushes the f5 pawn, advancing with his pawns in the center of the board. Magnus targets the e5 pawn, and Hans Niemann just keeps on pushing it. Magnus, making a slight mistake here, plays g4, and Hans Niemann capitalizes on it and plays rook c5. This is an amazing game played by Hans Niemann, and a not so good game played by Magnus Carlsen. We have Magnus dropping his bishop back all the way, and Hans Niemann blunders because he probably had something really good, and this just isn't as good. But knight c4, and Magnus misses the opportunity playing a4. Bishop takes c4. Bishop takes, rook takes, and it still even looks better for black, but now it looks a lot better for black. He finds knight d6, defending the pawn, defending this pawn, and attacking the rook. So we have a rook here anyways, which it doesn't do anything because both these pawns are defended, even though you have 2 attackers, defended by the knight and the king. So we have Hans Niemann taking Magnus's pawn. Now, rook over attacking the knight, and he doesn't have to do anything about it because this threat is so big. Pawn forwards. If Magnus were to take, we have rook down. If rook blocks, we take here. He takes, we take, and we're just up a rook. And if we do taking here, we play rook down. He has to block. Then we take, and he goes king up. We take, he takes, we promote, and we win the game because we have a queen. So Magnus has to take back. He cannot take the knight right now. And now he has knight e4. And you can see that the knight is guarding these 2 squares. The king is on the square. So this is almost checkmate. If Magnus takes the free pawn, he would drop checkmate in 1. Magnus doesn't drop checkmate in 1 because he's not stupid. He plays king f1, and Hans Niemann plays rook c1. Magnus moves his king up to g2, and Hans double attacks on the bishop and the pawn. Now, Magnus finds bishop takes f7, but it's not good enough because Hans Niemann takes on e2, and Magnus is forced to go down. Hans Niemann repeats a couple times, and then plays king f6. It's very important to repeat moves a couple times in games like this because at classical games, after 40 moves, you get a time bonus, and they are at 39 moves right now. And before they started repeating moves, they were at 35, 36, 37, 38. Now that's 39. So this is the 40th move played by Magnus. 40th move played by Han. And we have, oh, maybe there's no time bonus in this format of the tournament, but normally there is on the 40th move. Or maybe now there's increment. Now, every time they make a move, they get time back. But we have rook f7 check and king g6. He could have made a grave mistake there, but he didn't. Now Magnus plays rook d7. Not the best move, but it is kind of tricky because you get this bishop move where your rook is now attacking. Or what we take here, I don't know. It's a little bit tricky. He's just looking for tricks because he's losing right now. But Hans Niemann plays knight out. Magnus plays bishop here. Check. And I think Hans Niemann can take with the knight. Maybe he can't. What happens if Hans Niemann takes with the knight? Rook takes d2. The rook was hanging and I didn't see it. So Hans Niemann cannot take with the knight because you drop your rook. After king f5 by Hans Niemann, Magnus takes the free rook, but it's not actually free because there's a knight fork. And now we're playing a knight for a bishop, but this is not good for Magnus because Hans Niemann is up a pawn. And at this level, one pawn in an endgame is very important. Hans plays check, Magnus drops his king back, Hans takes the free pawn, Magnus pushes, Hans takes, Magnus targets this pawn, doesn't matter, Hans moves his king over, we have bishop attacking the pawn, and knight f3, very important, because he's giving up a free pawn, and it looks like it's not good for Hans, but now he brings his knight back. Magnus takes a second pawn on this side of the board. It looks like he just gave away those pawns for nothing, but now we have knight c6 and bishop to b7. Hans picks up the pawn, and now he has 2 pawns for literally nothing. A rook, a knight versus a bishop, and Magnus tries to hold on, but Hans is actually a grandmaster, so you can't really beat anyone when they have 2 pawns more than you. I don't know why I look super tired. Thanks for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.